Welcome back for part 7. I have bled the brakes. These they're a bit of a nightmare to bleed over, say, a car brake setup, because these are the reservoirs and you need to take these plugs out, fill them up with fluid, put the plug in, push the pedal down, undo the bleed nipple. I've managed to put these banjos on, haven't really gone into that. And then close the bleed nipple, back off the pedal, take the plug out, put some more fluid in, which takes forever, but they are both done. As you can see there, that's the rear brake, and it's got a balance valve. So that's all good. Need to shorten these pedals because if I take my shoe off, your feet are actually going to be down, the heels down quite low. So the pedals need to come down a bit. So maybe a couple of bolts out of here, some M10 bolts. Don't know, it doesn't actually need much braking force, but obviously I don't want to make the brake pedal really weak. Accelerator pedal doesn't really matter too much, but yeah, I might come off here with a pin. Don't know what to do about that yet. Might just take that brake pedal off and mount it below the bar. Anyway, lots of jobs like that that just need quite a lot of thinking about first to come up with a solution. Another problem I've got is the carb is not level, and it's also pointing behind the seat, and it might get in the way of the gear change. So I need to turn that round and face it forwards. So I'm going to take this off and see if I can adapt that manifold. So cut the angled section off, made a new plate and then welded it on. Not really stacking pennies, but that should do the job. Let's get the car bolted back on. That is the carburetor bolted back on. So next job is the gear change, which moves up and down. It's going to go to a gear stick about here. So probably use cables to do that. Let's get on and make some brackets. Just looking at steering column mounts. So this was one of the pieces of tube off down there, the sort of outrigger, just cleaned it up. And I've got some oil light bushes, which are just the right size to go on this steering column. And obviously those push into there, like that. And that gives me a bush for the top steering column part, so I can weld to this, to the frame. The only thing is I'm going to pull this frame off because it's a little bit too high. I need it about an inch, maybe an inch and a half lower, I think. So I'm going to cut this top rail off and drop it down a little bit, which will be the next part, next item to do. So a few more modifications since last video. I've cut the ends off the pedals. This one's just got a bolt on at the moment. I'll put a piece of rubber tube over that to get some grip. And then I've done the same thing with this, but because it's a brake, this is welded here. This is the stud that threads into the forged aluminium arm, and then I've added an extra pivot point down here so that it's much more rigid. I've mounted the rack below the two tubes. It was above, but Maddie came down and the rack was sort of touching the calves of her legs. I got the floor in, which is sort of spaced to the right height, because the other thing with this front end is the bodywork sort of cuts in much lower in the center section, so I need enough clearance on the pedals so the pedals still move but they don't get in the way of the body line. What else have I done? That is about it. Just looking at gear change. I think the gear change is going to be a cable because it needs to be moved up and down. So I've got a couple of these cables from Amazon, which are for a motorbike brake, GY6 something, but it's got these useful ends, so I can do a push-pull cable arrangement to the gear change, which has got to come off this bar here. Just adding bits of tape on so I see what the aperture's like for the passenger compartment, and the lines where it's sort of slightly offset because it's supposed to be a right-hand drive car. Yeah, that is what we have for now. I just tried to tape up the sides. I thought the body line was a bit high, but it's not too bad. It might be all right, but I'll check that again. So this is a few more hours later. I've added a bit of shape to the back because it's got these sort of pontoons on the back of the model that I'm going by. Let's just find that. These bits. So I've added those at the back. Bit of bracing as well because I'm going to need to lift it on these 2 points and it's getting quite heavy, so I have to do a bit of bracing to get that strong enough. Still need to do a top engine steady off here. I had to cut and weld the exhaust manifold because that was a bit too close to the disc. Now I've got about 8mm clearance, which should be just enough. Don't know what to do with an exhaust system yet. See how noisy it is like that. It might be a straight pipe if I can get away with it. Gear change from the lever that is off the gearbox here. I've added 2 cables. These are brake cables from GY60, I think it is. So they are just threaded through a pivot point here, bolt with a hole drilled through it, and then a push and a pull cable to the gear stick. It's just got a snooker ball on the top, and then changes gear like that. Added a front bar just to see where the seat needs to go. Over to a go-kart seat. Now the other seat that I had was a bit too padded, so it's slightly biased this way for right-hand drive, but not very much, because that makes it a bit difficult to get to the brake pedal if it's too far over. So I've dropped the body line down a little bit, so it's a little bit lower, especially on the back tyre. I need to drop the front down a little bit more. I'm going to need to cut these front sections, and also get rid of this because this is just a piece to keep it the right width at the moment. But yeah, slowly it's getting there. The major annoying thing I found out while doing the gear change is that the gearbox that I thought was 3 forward, 1 reverse is actually 1 forward, 1 reverse, which means the projected top speed that I thought I had of 60 kilometers an hour in third in the 1 forward gear is now 30, maybe 25 kilometers, which is a bit disappointing. So I'm going to have to swap the internals of that for a 3, or you can get a 4-speed cluster. Yeah, a bit annoying, but so I need to put a fuel tank in, air filter, connect up the throttle cable, get Maddie in for a test, going up on the rear sprocket slightly just to reduce the need for a chain tensioner, and that is about it for this episode.